Please welcome Aaron Blinka, Principal Software Engineer at HMH Pressure Control Systems. Aaron will be presenting Securing Cloud Disconnected Small-Scale Systems for Offshore Drillships, Challenges and Solutions.
Hello, thank you. Like the voice said, I am Aaron Blinka, and this is Securing Cloud Disconnected Small-Scale Systems for Offshore Drillships, Challenges and Solutions. And what that means is that I'm really bad at coming up with concise titles for my presentations. Wait, oh, there's a clicker. All right, sorry, forgot where the clicker was. No. So what that actually means is that following best practices for cybersecurity to the letter can be requiring a lot of infrastructure, right? Like you've seen a lot of presentations this week, with people showing Purdue models that have like an antivirus server and a patch server and a jump box and a this and that and the other thing. And you talk about micro-segmentation and zero trust. And a lot of this stuff gets to a point where it requires a lot of infrastructure. Right, and so when you're in a very constrained system, sometimes implementing all of this stuff just isn't practical. So today we're going to talk about one of those systems that's used in offshore drilling, and we're going to go through some practices that you can use if you find yourself in a similar situation to still meet some of the requirements from your standard of choice. Right, for oil field, IEC 62443 is the gold standard, and so that's what we align to. But I mean, these things would work for NIST or NERC or whatever it is that your industry uses, right? So a little bit about me. My name is Aaron Blinka, like I said. I'm Principal Software Engineer at HMH Pressure Control Systems, and even though it doesn't say that on the slide, I'm also the Product Security Leader for Operational Technology. I've got about 15 years of industry experience, started off as a back-end engineer with a variety of technologies, and I still do a little bit of that work. I've spent 11 years working with PLC and SCADA technologies from various manufacturers, and I still do a little bit of that work too. So I have a little bit of a conflict of interest, I guess you could say, in terms of being on the implementation side and also on the cybersecurity side, but we make it work. I'm an IEC 62443 certified fundamental specialist, and I've done quite a bit of work with DevOps, software infrastructure, and testing, especially in the ICS space. So, as some of you may know, DevOps and infrastructure for PLCs have not traditionally been the best. It's getting better in recent years, but for many years we needed better infrastructure than was available. So I did a lot of work internally to my company to really get us where we needed to be. So I wanted to give a little bit of background into offshore drilling for those who are not familiar. So offshore drilling is a lot like what it sounds. The drilling vessels go miles offshore, sometimes 60, 70 plus miles offshore. They drill a hole in the ocean floor, and they extract oil and gas reserves that are then piped onshore and things like that, right? So these drilling vessels go to some of the harshest, remotest places in the world. They're frequently drilling in water depths up to 12,500 feet. And then, of course, the drill pipe goes even further down than that. So it requires a lot of sophisticated technology, subsea equipment, and control systems to do all of that effectively and safely. One of those control systems is called a Blowout Preventor. So if you've seen the movie Deepwater Horizon with Mark Wahlberg, or if you remember the Deepwater Horizon incident from 2010, that's a blowout, right? And the blowout preventer is what's used to prevent that, right? So a blowout occurs when you have what's called a kick. And a kick is when a bubble of hydrocarbons comes up out of a well, and if it's not contained, it will hit the floor of the drill ship and it will explode. And that causes damage to equipment, to the environment, and ultimately to people. And that's what you saw happen with Deepwater Horizon, unfortunately, right? And so this piece of equipment is very significant, very safety critical for these drilling rigs. And that's the equipment that my company manufactures. And so that is the example that we'll be using today as we walk through some of this. So zooming in on the blowout preventer specifically, what the blowout preventer is a large stack of metal valves. You can see that, let's see if I can point. That's this thing, it looks very small, but in reality, it's about 3 stories tall of giant metal valves, connectors, and what we call individual blowout preventers, which have multiple different types. The most common are what's called a ram, which either crushes or shears the pipe to form a seal and keep those bubbles of hydrocarbons down. There's also something called an annular, which basically irises open and close to control the position of the pipe inside the. Was there a question? No? Okay, cool. So that stack, we call that a stack, is the equipment under control. So on the Purdue Model, this is our level 0. This is the equipment that we must have available at all times for safety purposes, right? So this is the crown jewel that we want to protect. Locally, this is controlled by something we call a subsea electronics module, or SEM, which gets really confusing when you talk about security information event management, right? So we tend to call it a SEAM in our world just for differentiation. But the subsea electronics module is responsible for controlling solenoid valves, reading back sensors like pressure, temperature, that kind of thing. And then that communicates back to a second control system that is located on the drill ship itself, and you can kind of see that called out here in control cabinets. That is a surface control system. And as far as the electronics, OT, and cybersecurity piece is concerned, this is where all the action happens, right? So all the controls equipment is located in cabinets that sit in a secure room. If any of you guys saw the physical security penetration testing presentation this morning, you know that physical security is kind of in quotation marks. But so it sits in a secure-ish room on the drill ship, and then it communicates down to the subsea electronics to control our blowout preventer. So you'll see the picture of let's see if I can point at it. Oh, yeah, my finger's covering the thing. So this is a satellite, as you may know. So rigs connect to the internet and to the outside world via satellite. And the satellite is a big part of what we're going to talk about here today, because that satellite connection is very low bandwidth and it's very unreliable. And so getting access out to any kind of cloud service is a really big challenge. So to give you an example of the kind of bandwidth you can expect, sometimes you can get speeds up to like 2 megabytes up and 1 megabyte down. But even in those cases, I've had field engineers tell me, hey, I can't upload a 3 megabyte file. It keeps timing out. It won't work. I can't get anything out. It's pretty challenging. And it's not always that bad. Sometimes you can get data to the cloud. It's just not very reliable. And a lot of times when you do remote service, you get response that's about the same as an old 56K modem, if anybody's old enough to remember those, where you kind of type, and then you wait a few seconds and you see the letters pop up. It's kind of like that. So what's the problem here, right? The biggest problem that we're going to start with is space. So here you see an actual picture of the surface control system. This is in that secure room. And what you'll notice here is there is no spare space here whatsoever, right? Drill ships are marine vessels, and like any marine vessel, like a submarine or whatever else, space is allocated on you get as little as you can possibly get away with kind of basis, and you don't get any more. These cabinets are actually put in to the drill ship while it's being constructed, and then the roof and the walls are put in around them. So you physically can't take these cabinets out and replace them with something else without cutting a hole in the side of the drill ship in most cases. So you're stuck with what you get. And the second problem here is that these are legacy equipment that were designed 20, 25 years ago with technology that's 30, 35 years old. And like any system that was designed that long ago, security was not really a concern. it wasn't something that was on their mind cybersecurity-wise. And so there's no equipment in here really that's there for cybersecurity. There's no real infrastructure that you can take advantage of. And that's a problem. So looking at that, you might say, well, hey, there's a whole oil rig there. Can you take advantage of some of their infrastructure? And in some cases, you can. A lot of rigs will have their own VPN remote access solution, something like BombGuard, Coin, or whatever the case may be. And in those situations, they can provide the VPN access and then allow us to remote into the system. But not all vendors, not all oil rig operators are the same. Some have more sophisticated infrastructure. Others are earlier in their cybersecurity journey and don't have that kind of infrastructure in place. So, in many cases, the rig infrastructure may be mixing IT systems with other OT systems. You don't know what the environment is there, and it varies from one rig to the next. So for us to have a standardized solution, we have to make sure that we're protecting ourselves. So that's a key piece of this. So we need to have some kind of infrastructure ourselves. Now, you might ask, why can't you use cloud services, right? There are a lot of cloud, either services that are directly in the cloud or vendors that offer things that are cloud enabled, that kind of thing. But the problem here becomes that satellite, right? And the bandwidth. It really can't support a stable connection to the cloud. And that puts you in a situation where you need to protect yourself and put your security in place in an on-prem basis. Some other complicating factors there become regulations. Various regions of the world have different regulations, and these drill ships move around the world while they go from one well to the next. And so you can't guarantee what the internet access is even going to be like based on different regulations. So it's a very dynamic environment, and trying to come up with a standardized solution that can work for your system, because we're an OEM here, right? So we need to provide a system that is as standardized as possible. And that in and of itself is the challenge that we're trying to deal with. All right, so what you're looking at here is a Purdue model of that legacy control system. We call it Gen 2 in-house. But right away, you'll probably notice some concerning things in this model, right? So first of all, there's no level 3 in your Purdue model here. And you also have levels 1 and 2 on the same zone, which, as we all know, is not good, right? In addition, you have this box over here on the right called Data Logger. That is a historian, but it's also our remote access conduit into the system. And so what that means is this level up here, level 4, is the rig network. You have a direct conduit from that rig network that's untrusted, that might have IT systems on it, directly into your basic process control layer, right? So that's definitely an item of concern. This is all one flat network, so you have no segmentation whatsoever. If an attacker makes it past the rig network into this network, they've got access to just about everything, and you're in bad shape. So this system relies heavily on an air gap. And for the most part, it is air gapped. But as we all know, an air gap is not sufficient security. You'll get USB used for applying software updates. Whenever we do remote service, they actually do have a connection that is made so that you can get out to the outside world and provide that remote service. And they'll unplug the cable when they're done, assuming they follow proper procedure, which, as we all know, humans are infallible and never make mistakes. So definitely some concern here with this system, or with this design. So what did we do about it? What we did was we took that cabinet that was labeled data log, because that was in its own cabinet, and we were able to rework that into a piece of technology that we call C-Lytics. So C-Lytics also added some remote monitoring and diagnostics, which is why it got rebranded. But for our purposes, we're looking at it from the historian and the remote access piece. So that old data logger cabinet had a dot matrix printer in it. So I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember dot matrix printers. Yes, you can still find them outside of a museum, but it is hard. We were able to take that out of this cabinet and we were able to replace that with some hardware firewalls and establish a DMZ, or DMZ of sorts, right? Because you'll notice on this Purdue model, the revised Purdue model, there's no level 3.5, where you might typically see a DMZ. And that's because there's no place for us to put a jump box, to put that physical isolation to really get to the level 3.5. And so for us, level 3 is our DMZ. That's just kind of what we have. And it's a much better segmentation, and so it's a much better protection than what we were on in the last slide. So like I say, we've established our DMZ. We deny all by default, and we were able to rework the controls a little bit so that we can ensure we had a one-way data flow out of the control layer and into that DMZ, and then ultimately out to the external networks, which is good. It's not currently enforced by a data diode, which would be better, but that's kind of in the roadmap. And we'll talk more about roadmaps here in a few minutes. All right, so let's talk a little bit about best practices. One of the good best practices that we've talked about here is protecting your perimeter. So establishing a DMZ is a very good way to segment your network and really help prevent attackers from getting into your networks and then from pivoting into the lower levels of your network and compromising your critical assets. So if you don't have a DMZ or hardware firewalls and you're able to add any kind of equipment, use it to add the hardware firewall so that you can get that segmentation. And if you're not able to do that, then you'll want to use things like routers and VLANs to get some segmentation and some software firewalls to give you a little bit of protection, right? The other thing you'll want to do is know exactly which ports and services you need, document that, and then close everything else. This will reduce your attack surface greatly and will make it harder for an adversary to find your system and then to get into it ultimately. And then use system hardening. So even really old, obsolete systems typically have some kind of feature that can be used to harden it at least a little bit. So look into what your system can provide and harden it as much as you can without making any design changes. So it's basically increase your security without having to make bigger design changes, right? Second, use your small scale to your advantage. We've talked about some reasons why small scale can be problematic, but it can also give you a place to start in terms of using manual processes that really aren't viable at all in larger facilities like perhaps a power plant that may have dozens of PLCs and hundreds of operator stations. These kind of systems have 2 or 3 PLCs. They have 4 to 6 operator stations. And so even though manual processes like we're showing here are not best practices overall, it can be a really good place for you to at least establish a security baseline and then evolve over time with more automated and sophisticated technologies. So a few things you can look at. One is asset inventory. So there's a lot of vendors outside who are selling asset inventory technologies, automated discovery, scanning, all of these kind of things. But if you don't have the infrastructure or the funds or whatever to get those systems, you can, in a small scale system, do this by hand, right? Looking at your bills of material, your software bills of material, doing manual inspections and walkthroughs, because again, it's a smaller scale. So with a walkthrough, you can still get a pretty good idea of what's actually on your network, assuming you do it frequently enough. Whereas for larger distributed systems, that's really not possible. So here you at least have the ability to do that if you put the process in place and then go do that manual work. There's another thing you can do is account management. Manually configuring accounts, even on 4 to 6 workstations, is not fun. But it is possible. And it's the same sort of thing where if you have 50 to 100 workstations, configuring all of those accounts manually is either incredibly painful or not possible at all. So if you don't have the infrastructure for an Active Directory, you can still do it by hand and at least have some measure of being able to do that, right? The last one is patching. So again, if you don't have a patch server, you don't have that automatic update capability, you can still patch with USB, with SneakerNet. Please scan the USB first to make sure that it's not infected with anything. If you don't have like a kiosk or an automated device that does that, you could still use like a laptop with an antivirus. It may not be as ideal again, but at least you need to do something, right? The other thing that's nice about oil rigs specifically when it comes to patching is that oil rigs move around, and when they move from one well to the next, there's what's called a between well maintenance window where you can potentially do software updates, patching, and updates to the system. So unlike some systems that are up 24/7 for 20 years, and patching is basically a nightmare, patching, while still problematic and difficult, is much more feasible in this drilling rig situation than it may be in other situations, right? Find a partner. So especially if you're a small-scale company, because many companies like mine who have small-scale systems are also small-scale companies, finding a solutions provider or other vendors that can help you on your cybersecurity journey can be very important and very beneficial. So some things that we've found and experienced can be license cost. When we've talked with vendors on our own, since we're small scale, we have 1Z, 2Z kind of things, and so we wind up paying big license fees for these tools when we only need a couple of licenses. We only actually need a little bit, but we wind up paying for a lot. And so we found that there are some vendors out there who have been able to, they purchase licenses in bulk because they deal with many clients, and then they can basically sell us what we need at a more reasonable cost for us. And even though you may see the big players in the oil industry, like the Shells and the Exxon, making big profits, the lower level OEMs really are still very cost conscious. And if we want to be competitive in the market, we have to be very cost conscious. And that's true across all industries. That's not just the oil field, right? Lightweight tools, it kind of ties into the same thing. If you want to be competitive, you need to find tools that are right-sized for you. And when you're a small-scale system, you don't need enterprise-grade systems. You need something small that works for you, that's not too complicated for your field engineers to work with. So a vendor or a partner can really help you with identifying the right tools for you. And then as you're growing in your cybersecurity journey, it's helpful to have a partner that can help you with training, with playbooks, and with even experience for going out into the field and performing some services for your clients. So it can help you to supplement your capabilities while you grow on your journey. Lastly, establish a multi-generational technology plan. The things I've talked about here are a good starting place, but it's not the end. There are a lot of more sophisticated technologies out there. They evolve all the time. When we started on our cybersecurity journey 4 or 5 years ago, it was much harder to find services and tools that would meet our needs than it is today, talking to the vendors out on the floor. And 3 or 4 years from now, it probably will be even easier. So the technologies that you can use to defend are evolving, but at the same time, attackers are also evolving, and we have to evolve with them or we will get left behind, or in our case, probably compromised, which we definitely want to avoid, right? So these are some steps that you can take on a multi-generational technology plan to help you get where you need to go, right? So the first thing you want to do is know where you are. Establish your asset inventory as best you can. Know what is critical, what was not as critical, where you need to focus your protection efforts. Document everything, conduct your risk assessments. Doing a penetration test can help you a lot with understanding where the gaps in your current security configuration are and things that you may need to focus on. And reviewing your reference architecture with a qualified third party can help you a lot in terms of developing a roadmap like this, and then also understanding where the opportunities for improvement in your design are and what you should focus on first. System hardening is important. We talked a little bit about this, but when you're early in your journey, take advantage of the capabilities that your system has without making big design changes. in an industry like ours, and in many of our industries, making a design change can be costly. It can take a long time to roll out into the field, and it can be a bigger project. Whereas a shorter putt to get you some benefit can be taking advantage of the features that you already have in your systems. We talked a lot about DMZ, but there's a lot of other remote access technologies that you should look at. VPN, whether you can take advantage of a provider on site or add it in for yourself. Look at multi-factor authentication, separating out a separate jump box if you're able to do that and establish that level 3.5 on your Purdue model. These are all really good things to do, and they can help keep you secure. Multi-factor authentication may be the most important of all those. I mean, we've seen in multiple cyber incidents where multi-factor authentication could have prevented an attacker from getting into a system, and so that's a very important thing to look at. Detection and visibility. So this can go a little bit to improved asset inventory, as many vendors out on the floor will tell you. Also look into technologies like an intrusion detection system, EDR, a SIEM. I mean, there's a whole variety of them out there. Basically, everyone on the floor will try to sell you one. And then lastly is adapt and evolve. Update your risk assessments, continually update your asset inventory, keep up to date with the tools and the technologies that are there to help you, and just continue to invest in your cybersecurity journey. You'll probably need to keep continually talking with your management, your leadership, to convince them of the need for this. I've run into this sometimes where my management will say, well, can't I just do a one-time project and improve my security and be done? And I think most of us in the room know that's not the case, right? It has to be a continual investment and a continual battle in many cases to keep that cybersecurity journey going. And so that's probably the most important takeaway that you should have from this is never stop working on improving your cybersecurity. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I invite any questions that you may have. Okay, well, look, thank you. If you want to talk to me after, let me know, and thank you.